Okay, so my topic tonight, I'm just going to briefly talk about what is a transition clinic. And this is an area really over the last maybe 5 to 6 years that I've actually become quite interested in. And I think Epilepsy Ireland and a lot of the pediatric neurologists and adult neurologists around the country are trying to focus on this really important time for adolescents and young teenagers as they transition over to the adult services. And that's really what we mean by a transition clinic. But it's not a quick thing. It's something that we're slowly going to be working on really from the time that you actually become a teenager. So 12, 13, 14. But I fully believe, which I'm going to show you on the next slide, is that learning about your epilepsy should start early. It doesn't have to start just in your teenage years. So everybody's experience, by the way, from going from a pediatric clinic to adult services is going to be different. And it's going to be different for lots of different reasons. One is that not every teenager with epilepsy is going to be the same. So there's some of you may have more complex medical needs. Some may have some learning issues that require a little bit more support as we move from the pediatric to the adult services, and some may still continue to need some adult support service initially or maybe even lifelong. So it's really about guiding everyone in the family or your carers as we transition from this really important and really, I have to say, an exciting time. I'm very sad sometimes to see the patients go, but I'm so proud and excited for them to see them grow and become independent and understand more about their epilepsy. So the main thing I want to just briefly talk about today is how do you get ready? Now, the two other speakers are going to talk in detail about a few other things, but I'm going to just highlight some things for you guys to think about. And there's two main things that I want you to take away from my brief sort of slides here. One is starting to be a self-advocate. And what do I mean by that? What I mean is ability to speak up about things that matter to you. And we all know, kind of being a teenager, you're definitely able to speak out about things that you care about or that you don't like or that you don't want. So we want the same thing when you're coming into your meetings with us as your doctors. We want to hear about how you feel about your epilepsy, what's worrying you, what's concerning you. So I want you to start asking questions. That would be the one thing. So be a self-advocate. And the second thing that we want to think about is, working on your independent skills. And again, the two other speakers will talk about this, but for me, your parents can still support you, but it's about taking ownership and getting involved independently managing your epilepsy. And as I say, this is a process that's going to take a little bit of time. So how do we build these skills? So the main thing is start early. No matter what age you are, you can start getting involved in understanding your epilepsy. Honestly, from age 5, 6, 7, 10, I've met lots of patients that are able to ask me really good questions. And I love, sometimes I don't even know the answers to some of the questions they're asking, but it's an important thing to start that relationship with your doctor. Practice asking and answering questions. What I mean by that is sometimes come prepared to the clinic. A lot of parents, I always advise them, ask your questions. When they're coming to clinic, they often bring out a book, and I love that, or their iPad, and they have a list of questions. As you are becoming to that age as a teenager, I want you guys to write down the questions that you might have and be able to take that time out in the session to say that you want to ask me questions. Now, you can start to spend time alone with the nurse or the doctor and ask any questions you might have. So don't be afraid to speak up and say that. And just so you know, in terms of understanding your right, once you're 16, you can attend a doctor or nurse on your own. So practice that before you come into us. There's something on my thing that says my TV is going to turn off, but let's hope that doesn't happen. Okay. The other thing that I want you to start doing as well is when you're kind of 15, 16, 17, and you're transitioning to the adult clinic, don't be afraid to start calling the nurse, making appointments that you might want to do. If you need to cancel appointments, start calling and practicing what that would feel like. Know about your epilepsy. So what I mean by learning about your epilepsy is know what type of epilepsy you have. If you don't know what type of epilepsy you have, speak to your doctor, speak to the epilepsy nurse, call Epilepsy Ireland, talk more about that. I'm trying to change the way I also practice medicine and really teaching the parents about the type of epilepsy they have. And again, that will trigger more questions to ask. So in addition to knowing what type of epilepsy you have, you need to know your medications. You need to know what medications you're on. You need to know the doses of your medications, and you need to be aware of the side effects. And if you're not sure of what the side effects are, again, that's what we're here for. We need to answer those questions. So don't be afraid to ask if you're not feeling right on your medications. Maybe there's a reason for that. So knowing your medications is another important point. So I'm just going to briefly, sorry, no, that's not going down. Hold on, I'm not sure why that's not, did it just freeze? Is it moving? I don't know why it's doing that. Let me just see if there's any other, I'm not sure why it's doing that. Do you want me to try and stop it and try again?
If you right click on your mouse, Liz, and just press next slide, it should come up.
Okay, I'll try that. Yep, thank you. So as I was saying, depending on the type of epilepsy you have, so understanding what kind of seizures you have, you really have to, one of the main things about taking ownership and independence about your epilepsy is understanding what your triggers are for your particular seizures. So I'm just going to go through and highlight maybe what are the top kind of 8 things that might be a trigger for your epilepsy or your seizures. And you need to think about this for yourself as well. So one of them is forgetting to take your meds. Forgetting to take your meds is a really big problem when you're a teenager, because sometimes you're busy, you're going out, you've got exams and school. So taking your meds is one of the things that can sometimes get forgotten. And in the next slide, I'm going to talk about ways that you can remember to take your meds. So forgetting to take your meds is one problem. Another issue is lack of sleep. And again, I'm going to talk about sleep and the importance of sleep, but not sleeping, particularly for people who have epilepsy in their sleep or early in the morning or going into sleep. Lack of sleep is definitely a trigger. So when your parents have been bothering you about, oh, you have to get your 8 hours sleep, the reason for that is we want you to start working on your sleep hygiene to get the right habits for when you go into adulthood, because sleep and lack of sleep is definitely a big trigger. Missing meals is also a very common thing. As teenagers, I know you kind of, don't feel like eating breakfast, then lunch is just a little bit, and then you eat a lot in the evening. That can sometimes happen. I'm not speaking for all of you, but I'm saying this is sometimes how people can miss meals, and that can often be a trigger when your glucose is kind of going up and down. Stress, excitement, emotional upset. That's a very common thing for every single person. 1 second here, I'm just, sorry, 1 second here. Stress, excitement, emotional upset. So that's very normal for being a teenager and an adolescent and having kind of fluctuations of your emotion. So it's a tricky one, because I don't want people to be overly worried about triggers, but some people will say that when they're very nervous about something or very excited, you might often get a seizure. So it's just identifying some of those sort of triggers that might come into play. Okay. Another one is illness and fever. So if you're sick or have a high temperature, that's often a trigger for people's epilepsy. And then the other thing that I want you to be aware of is medications that can lower your seizure threshold. Can you guys hear me anyway, even though you can't see? Yeah? Okay.
Yeah, we can hear you, Liz.
Okay. So, so if you just go to the trigger page. Yeah. Okay. So, so other triggers might be medication. So why is that important? Okay, so as you become more independent and you're going off to university, but even before then, your GP may put you on an antibiotic, and lo and behold, you're completely unaware, but that antibiotic lowers your seizure threshold. So not just parents, but teenagers need to be aware that when they're being given a medication, you need to ask the question yourself, need to ask the pharmacist a question, will this interfere with my epilepsy medications? And for teenagers as well, and we're going to talk a little bit more about this, but certain medications like contraceptive pill, antibiotics, as I've mentioned, medications maybe for ADHD, for anxiety. A lot of these things that might be relevant could interfere with your seizure medication, so just be aware. The other thing is flickering lights and discos. This is a question that I get asked a lot, and the question you need to ask your doctor is, do I have photosensitive epilepsy? Because not all epilepsies are photosensitive. So flashing lights may affect one person with epilepsy, but it doesn't necessarily affect another person with epilepsy. So it's not a blanket statement that anybody with epilepsy can't go into a disco or can't enjoy, strobe lights. So if you are somebody, though, that's sensitive to strobe lights or photic, I just tell a lot of the schools around the area, I often just say two things. One, ask the DJ to turn off the strobe light, very simple. But as you get older and you start going into discos and pubs and nightclubs, etc., if there is a strobe light, the time that they put on the strobe light, just leave or go outside or take a break. So it's not that discos are a no-no. The whole idea about epilepsy is living with epilepsy, doing all the normal teenage stuff that everybody else does, but you're just aware possibly of what your triggers might be so that you can avoid them. The next one I'll talk about is excessive alcohol, drug use, and then subsequent withdrawal. So I know sometimes parents may go, why are we starting this conversation so young? But we all know, and I know the teenagers in the group know, that we all have friends or groups of peers that will drink at younger ages, and then there'll be others that don't start drinking or experimenting with drinking into their 20s, and some people who will not experiment or have any interest in alcohol at all. And really what I'm trying to say to you is no matter what category you fit into, the major point about alcohol, and I'll mention it in another slide, is you just want to avoid anything in excess. Now, I do say that for teenagers, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, I'm really advising no alcohol, okay? And the reason for that is I'm not advocating alcohol at all, because we're at the highest incidence really of trying to get your epilepsy under control, trying to, suppress the epilepsy with medications, and really help transition you into that 18, 19, 20, heading off to university, with the epilepsy trying to get under control. But for those where there is experimentation taking place, the main thing we try and teach you, and the main thing that we try and help you as you're transitioning to university, is avoiding binge drinking, which we try and advise anyone not to do, but also try and avoiding spirits and things with high alcohol that can interfere with the absorption of your medications. So it's not just about, the problems of drinking excessively. It's really, the point is that the alcohol and other medications and drugs, and this includes cannabis and hash and all those things, can interfere with the absorption of your medications, okay? And it can interfere with your drug levels and make you more prone to potentially having seizures. Okay, next slide. So what do we want to say about your medications? So in the previous slide, I mentioned about compliance being such an important thing. So take your meds every day, okay? Even from when you're young, everybody has a phone. So start setting reminders on your phone. And once your parents and yourself feel confident that you're able to take the medications independently, that's something that I would be advising to do sooner rather than later. And I'm talking to this group here, which, everybody's sort of that teenage age. So I would like to think that, using either a pill box or a reminder, so that you know that if you didn't open up the pill box and it's still there, that you're like, oh, I forgot my meds this morning, so that you have your routine that you and your doctor have discussed, that you take your medications as soon as you remember it, and make it part of your routine, like brushing your teeth. If you forget to take them, you take them as soon as you remember. But if it's greater than 6 hours, I often might tell my patients just to take your next dose a little bit earlier. Never, ever stop taking your medications without telling your team. That's a big no-no, because we don't want your levels to drop quickly. We need to do everything in a nice, controlled way. So it's really important that if you do head off to university, or you're doing 2 weeks away in France on an exchange program, please do not stop taking your medications. Always carry a spare dose of your medications, because the older you get, as you know, the more independence you often might have. You might be out shopping, you might be at, as I said, a disco, the movies, somebody's house for a sleepover. Don't forget to take your medications with you. Know when you're going to be out of your medications. So start looking at the bottle and saying, okay, I'm nearing the bottom here now. Maybe I need to get a prescription. Know your pharmacy number, put it into your phone, okay? And as I said, know the side effects of your anti-epileptics. I think as teenagers, it's really important that you ask me. I try and tell you as much as I can about the medications. Usually I kind of give the top 5 or 6 side effects of the medications. But if you're feeling a certain way on the medications, it may be the medications, it may not be the medications, but if you don't tell me how you're feeling, I won't know, how to make that better for you. Okay, so next slide. I'm not going to talk about too much about sleep because sleep will be discussed later. Our aim for teenagers is 8 hours. Personally, I'd love it if it was 10 hours for you guys, so 8 to 10 hours. I know on the weekends that's not a problem, but during the week, getting 8 hours can often be difficult with the phone and all the other things. So working on good sleep hygiene, which might be discussed a little bit later on, is important. So avoid stimulants like coffee and chocolate past maybe, coffee and tea again, and I wouldn't be advocating too much of that, but generally try and avoid it past 2 p.m. in the afternoon. You want to keep your room calm, have sensory lights, whatever, just to keep it nice and relaxed. If you have a late night, plan for more sleep the next day. If you're napping during the day, don't nap always less than 1 hour, because if you nap for more than 1 hour during the day, you're going to have difficulty sleeping. And in general, avoid lie-ins. What I'm saying by that, it's all about keeping your routine every day of the week. If you have a lie-in, it means you're late for your meds, etc. The other thing I'll say to parents as well, while they're still under your care and in your house, is that if they do have a late night out, just make sure that if they are sleeping in the next day, that they're somewhat supervised, that they're not, completely on their own that way. And that may lead into talking about joining one of the sessions, and I think it's tomorrow, someone might be able to clarify that, about alarms. So epilepsy alarms and things, and watches that teenagers can use and parents can use to be able to notify you when a seizure is taking place. That's very helpful for seizures that happen at night. And I've found a lot of teenagers of mine that have transitioned to university that are actually still under my care because they're still waiting to get to adult services, that these Apple Watches and other kinds of alarm systems, which will be discussed in more detail, can be very useful and give both give you guys peace of mind and parents peace of mind as well. Okay, you can skip this slide. We're not going to talk about stress and well-being. I just wanted to give one quick slide about studying and exams. You're going to get more info a little bit from Dr. Anya O'D on how to get organized and get ready for the day. But I would like to say a couple of quick things. Please don't forget to ask for help from school. Push them. Talk to the guidance counselor. Talk to the teachers. Where are you having difficulty yourself? For the students, I want you to do this too, but also parents can help advocate as well. But if you guys are feeling that you're struggling in school or you're having difficulty concentrating or attention, memory, sometimes it's medication. It's not always medication, but it can be medication. So it's worth a discussion with your doctor or nurse. But sometimes you might need to get a neuroeducational assessment, because we do find that children with epilepsy often have a higher incidence of learning issues as well. So that's something that if you think that's an issue, it may or may not be related to the epilepsy, but it's worth getting an assessment. And the sooner you ask for the assessment in the school, the sooner it can be done through the public system and you don't have to pay for it privately. The other thing that I want you to all be aware of, if you have epilepsy, you can gain access to the Disability Access Route to Education. It's called the DARE program. So I want you to look on the State Examination Commission for more details. But this is a program that's designed and filled out by usually your neurologist. Sometimes your GP can fill it out, and it helps with getting into certain programs and lowering points that you might need to get in that will give you extra chance or an extra ability to go in. Because to be honest with you, having epilepsy can be difficult in your teenage years, which we'll talk about. Certain medications and things can, as I said, impair with function, and you might need to be on that medication, but yet it can make learning a little bit more difficult. So the DARE program is an excellent way to get resources and support doing your leaving cert. From the other thing, just to mention about during your exams and your leaving cert and junior cert, make sure you speak to your doctor at least 6 months in advance of the leaving cert. So if you want more time, I always am an advocate for everybody, look for whatever help you can get in the exam. If you can get a separate room, that might be an option, and also more time. You get the time pause, so you can have breaks and then go back to the exam. So I'm big supporter of that as well. And usually your neurologist or the nurse can write epilepsy nurse can write a letter for you. And then just lastly, the RACE, the Reasonable Accommodation Certificate Examination, that's something else that you can look for as well. It's, again, you can gain access, and it's just learning about your rights in university and during your leaving cert years with your diagnosis of epilepsy. Okay, and is there any more? I think that might be my last one. Is there another one? Yeah. So that, I'm sorry now about the TV and things like that. Sorry about that. But in general, the main things I want to stress to parents and teenagers is start being an advocate. Start thinking about what you want from your pediatric doctor to help transition you to the adult world. Look for resources on Epilepsy Ireland. They've got some great, I've taken a lot of this from the Epilepsy Ireland website on purpose, so that you guys can use my talk as a template to go back and look there. Okay.